a show talking about job hunting and tips and little humor as best we can, as best we can muster it, and try to help people at the same time. And so this thing's sort of taken a life of its own to where we have a pretty good following now. And so I'll turn it over to Teddy, and then we can introduce our guest today.
Yeah, and for those who don't know who I am, I'm Teddy Burriss, and my name is right there on the screen. And I'm a LinkedIn strategist, but I'm also a networking strategist, and I love to have conversations and help people to use social media as a networking tool. And I love to help my job seekers, career transition friends figure out how to use these tools as well. But when Randy and I got together, we decided he and I are not the experts. Randy, that's not really true. We're not the experts in this conversation.
I know.
Okay. What we want to do is bring really, really cool, smart, engaging people to the conversation. And so to this week, we got our my buddy, Mr. Daniel Lobb. And Daniel's like right down the street from me, which is really cool. We're both Davie County, North Carolina guys. But Daniel is he's a certified professional in talent development. And he spent a lot of years, double digit, delivering training and consulting with businesses around the country. He's the president of an organization called TRP Enterprises. And TRP is this. It's becoming the totally responsible person. That's what they do. They help people discover how to become a totally responsible person. And Daniel's delivered this, his organization's delivered this to 250,000 people around the globe. Daniel, that's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people, Teddy.
Yeah, and besides his business and his focus on being a talent development professional, he's a husband, he's a father of 3 boys, he's a beekeeper and a pilot of a single engine airplane. He doesn't take those last 2 things lightly because they are really important to him as well as all the other things he does. So, buddy, thanks for coming. I really appreciate it.
Guys, thanks for having me. Delighted to be here today on the program.
What did I not say about you that you want to share with our, what are we up to now, Randy? 39,000 on Zoom and Facebook. We got about 3,000 people. What do you want to tell us, Daniel, about yourself?
Teddy, the rest is confidential. I'm not sure I can tell you any more than that. That's a very good lead off. Yeah. But the only thing I can kind of, elaborate on is you introduced what we do, TRP, which is totally responsible person. That is a mindset. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But the idea of being a totally responsible person is taking the idea of responsibility and applying it to how we look at the world. So most of us walk through life either accepting that we are at the center of the choices that we make and that we influence the environment around us and that we are powerful, or we see ourselves as sort of the victim of circumstance, sort of floundering our way through life. So it's a mindset that can be taught, that can be developed, can be implemented. And that's what we really specialize in, is we teach people to adopt a mindset that keeps us all optimistic, open-minded, and in pursuit of what really matters to us. So we teach that through formal training programs, and that's what I've been doing for the last dozen or so years.
Yeah. I like the use of the word person instead of people.
Yeah.
I can't make all 3 of us responsible, but I can do something and learn and make this person a more responsible person.
It's an individual choice we make. And think about any relationship, like take a marriage or an interpersonal relationship. As my wife often tells me, in a marriage, there's one person who's always right. And then the other one is a husband. And you may have heard that before.
I've never heard that, buddy.
Okay, well, that's new for you, Teddy, but I'm learning a lot about it. But in any relationship, there's really that one person we can control. And it doesn't matter if there's 3 of us, 2 of us, or thousands of us. Each of us take personal responsibility for our own mindset and what we're going to do.
Yeah. My wife never said those words to me. She gave me the guide to being a good husband. And it was just 1 page, and it just simply said 2 words: say yes. And that's all
Sage advice, Teddy. Sage advice.
So,
I just want to throw in again to encourage folks, if you have questions, to enter those in the chat area. I'm going to be monitoring that. We have people from San Francisco. We have South Carolina, Virginia, New York. We got Rochester, New York up there. Manchester, New Hampshire. So we have NAMSHA all along for the ride too. So chat your questions in. We'll get to them. And so fire away. Teddy,
cool.
what you got?
Well, Daniel, the purpose of our conversation is to help people predominantly in career search, but this also we get business professionals to show up here as well. But you know, when you look at the high level, it's tough to be looking for a job. There's a lot going on, you know, and maybe a lot not going on, which is why so many people are looking for a job. But you know, take the totally responsible person and, you know, high level, tell me how that can impact the job seeker, just in a high level view.
Yeah, so I think the idea is right now we're in certainly very uncertain territory. And I know in my business, we've been looking for the last few months at when are we going to get back to normal? And now I think it's becoming increasingly clear that one, normal is going to be very different. And two, we have no idea when. So in terms of the job search market, things are really turned upside down. There's obviously going to be a lot of economic impact that is going to last for who knows how long. I think all of us, whether we're employed or not, that uncertainty is looming pretty heavy over us. So when it comes to the idea of being a totally responsible person, it's really easy right now to give in to the doom and gloom and to think, well, God, nobody's hiring. I mean, why bother? Why don't I just wait another 3 months? Maybe the feds will revitalize the stimulus and I'll be okay for a bit. I mean, we can always go down the road of, and I think we need to be accepting of the circumstance, but it's easy to go down the road of complacency, right? Thinking, well, it's just out of my hands. There's nothing I can control. When in fact, I think the opposite couldn't be more true, that we have complete control over our own outlook. I think right now, as a totally responsible person, if I'm a job seeker, I really need to be reflecting keenly on what are my marketable skills, where are those opportunities, and I'm going to be dogged about finding them. So I think the personal responsibility comes into just not allowing ourselves to give into a negative way of thinking, and arguably a pretty tough climate, though I can't let that climate be my reason not to.
Yeah, I get it. I often hear people who get severance packages, and you know, not everybody does. I do know for a fact that if my wife fired me today, I wouldn't get a severance package, but some people do get severance packages. And then I hear this a lot as a career coach, and Randy, I'd wager you've heard this as well. Oh, I got 6 months. And I think a totally responsible person wouldn't wait until that severance package runs out to start figuring out what to do. So, huge. You make the right decisions as a totally responsible person. So here's another way to look at this. And you've used this phrase a few times with me in conversations, and I've heard it in some of your coachings. And that is this thing called the victim mentality.
Boom.
That's huge. Can you speak a little bit about that in the context of, you know, how that's a painful mentality?
Yes, the victim mentality is a painful mentality. So in the training programs that we use, that is a term that we kick around pretty freely, the idea of a victim mentality. And I'll visually represent this. So I think of the mindset that we carry as being on a spectrum. So one end of that spectrum is the victim mentality. It's that mentality where we believe that no matter what's going on in my world, there's always someone or something to blame for whatever it is that's happening. And we also believe that not only is there somebody else to blame, and I'm justified in feeling that way, but I also buy into this idea that I simply can't learn anything from difficult circumstances, right? I've hit a dead end road. The only thing I've learned is it sucks. So the victim mentality is a fundamentally negative way of looking at the world. Is it painful? Yeah, because we tend to run into the same mistakes over and over again. The victim mentality, we don't believe in learning. So the mistake was, that roadblock was put there by somebody else, not my fault, right? We never fundamentally deal with it. That's a real negative, painful way of thinking, one end of a mindset spectrum. Other end of that mindset spectrum, totally responsible person. So I think we see that. I know for me, I see my own victim mentality pop up a lot. I see it as a parent with three young kids who are all pretty much elementary school age. And we were kind of joking about that before the call started, but we can't make our kids do things. It's a real disappointment as a parent to learn that. You know,
I wish that somebody had redesigned that whole thing called kids, because it's not designed the way I want it.
You know, that's another, maybe that's a post-call meeting item that we need to handle. But, you know, we ultimately can't make other people do things, and we get frustrated by it. So it's easy to give into a victim mentality thinking. Or even in my work, I come up against difficulties in projects and programs we're planning. It's so easy to think, oh, why me? Why does this always happen to me? You know, and that's that victim mentality that creeps up on us. And if we're not careful of it, because it's sometimes easy to see, though we can really get caught up in the sort of sneaky nature of that victim mentality and not realize that we're in it and take out our frustrations on other people without recognizing, well, wait a minute, there's something going on with me that I haven't resolved. So that's where the work of the totally responsible person comes in, is I resist that temptation to point the finger outward and say, okay, what is this teaching me? You know, what's my learning? What's my insight in this?
And, you know, when you think about it, in job search, you know, all the different things that pile up to make that victim mentality happen. Like, A, my previous boss was a jerk. B, he fired me. C, I have to follow somebody else's rules to get a new job. They won't do it my way. Then we have, you know, I can't, they won't look at my resume. They won't interview me. They won't call me back. You know, they won't hire me, or if they do hire me, they hire me for peanuts before I was making, you know, huge bank. You know, all of these things all pile up and can be overwhelming to drive someone further away from that totally responsible person. How do you break that down?
Yeah, man, that's such a good point, Teddy. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I think it's easy. Almost everybody has worked for a jerk at some point, right? We've all had that strange blessing in our life. And if we haven't, I feel sorry for you. But we've all had opportunities in our lives to work for people. Let's just say at a baseline, we don't see eye to eye with. And we might think that they're wrong and we got it right. If we carry that with us away from whatever career we've just left, and now we're looking for the next one, in the back of our mind, we're thinking, well, man, you should see the guy I worked for last, or that gal who was with me, man. We carry that with us. What I think we've done a real disservice, because I think any of us who worked for a jerk need to go back and say, what did I really learn from working with that person? And the answer is not, well, I'm never working for that person again. You know, that, although, and I'm not kind of belittling the significance that there are some really tough people to work for and work with out in the world. Though, again, as a totally responsible person, it's so good if I can just say, all right, what did I learn from that experience? What did it teach me about me? What did it teach me about my ability to work with somebody who doesn't see the way that I do, or doesn't communicate the way that I do, or doesn't value the same things as me? I think if we can ask ourselves those kinds of questions, we're putting ourselves more on the pathway of the totally responsible person. We're not carrying that baggage with us to our next employment opportunity. And guess what? The same qualities that I didn't like in my first boss, you know who had those same bad qualities? My second boss. You know, same thing. The common denominator was me. And until I think we start to figure out, well, what is it in me that is so ruffled about this, we're liable to keep finding the same kinds of issues over and over again.
Yeah.
Are there questions that you should ask yourself? Are there specific steps, maybe things to write down? How do we go about that self-discovery to figure out, is it you or is it me? How do we go about that?
Thanks, Randy. I just saw that Sarah in the chat popped in the notion that the self-reflection can be painful, but really necessary. So I think there are questions that we can ask. Yeah. I'll give you a couple of specifics, though I think we each need to kind of tweak it to our own, to suit ourselves better. And I would offer you write these, and I'm not being like dogmatic about a pen, but you could type it out, whatever. But the self-reflective process, right? Going and doing that journaling, I think is really helpful. So I think reflecting back on a career, it's things like, one, what did I really love about that last career? In what aspects did I feel I was at my best? Mm-hmm. And if we can capture those moments where we were really shining and how we felt and how we were viewing that opportunity, I think that's good. So it's one, what did I really love about it? In what ways did I feel I was at my best? Secondly, what was challenging for me about that job or that opportunity? So to reflect on, where did we find ourselves really challenged, where we had to think, where we had to stretch, or maybe it was more of an emotional challenge of a disagreement or perhaps an underlying resentment we may carry. I would be careful about journaling. What were those experiences too? And then I think the final question is, what did I learn from that? Particularly, and both. What did I learn from both my strengths in those areas where I felt I truly shine? And what did I also learn, or am I learning, about those challenges that I found myself facing? Because there are clues in that I think for each of us help us develop a stronger sense of resiliency that's only going to make us that much more desirable as a candidate for that next opportunity.
Yeah, Daniel, I can see where it's a challenge for us to really dig into ourselves, to really be serious about getting into a conversation with ourselves about what did I really enjoy, where did I struggle, and what did I learn? And to be true to yourself, I think you have to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Brutal, maybe. To push yourself to really do that kind of research. Randy, a thought?
Well, and I was going to take the conversation to beyond yourself, but whether it's an accountability partner or somebody who can be brutally honest and maybe, okay, great, but I don't want to lose a friendship over it. So are there steps to educate the other person on how to hold me accountable? Maybe I could stare at my navel all day long and I may not learn a whole lot because I'm not that smart, but maybe Daniel could from the outside look at me and say, hey, here's some things you need to be aware of. How do we initiate that conversation with somebody to say, hey, could you help me to help myself? How does that look?
Good question, Randy. I like that. And I think the notion of having I often call it an accountability buddy or an accountability partner is really helpful. I think, and I've heard a lot of people use different phrases like, who's in my personal cabinet? Who are those people I lean on for the really crucial advice? So it doesn't necessarily have to be one person, but you may have a tribe or that personal cabinet or those people with whom you experience a deeper level of trust. And it might be like just kind of popping in with the two of you, right? You guys have such a great rapport. You've got such great experiences. You're both really invested in the idea of giving back. I would imagine that two of you could just, using that as an example, two of you can share a lot around career advice. Let's say either one of you are going through something challenging. You've got a great accountability partner. You may have other people in your life that you can really lean on for maybe something more personal, or maybe there's a different genre of my professional career I'd like to look at. But I think just phrasing it the way you did is probably a good way to get that conversation started. Hey, and I like to just say, hey, I'd like to ask you to listen to what I have to say and give me feedback. And be clear about what we want. You know, do we want feedback? Do we want just listening? Do we want them to call us up every 30 days and say, hey, did you do what you said you were going to do? But nothing wrong with being specific in our ask of our friends or our confidants. Most of us are wired to help others. And I think being invited to do that is really all the permission somebody else needs. So be careful what you ask for. People give you all kinds of feedback.
So it's incumbent upon me, if I want to better myself, to give permission to Teddy to I need help create the boundaries that he's going to operate within.
Yeah, set up the guidelines, right? The boundaries. What is it
Teddy,
you're
behave
asking
yourself.
for?
Teddy, behave yourself. Just saying.
Randy, I won't help you unless you ask me or you pay me.
I'm sorry, Daniel. We digressed here.
But I shouldn't have brought that up as an example. I knew it was going to be touchy. I'm sorry.
You're right, Daniel. I'm with you, and my buddy knows this. I think the two of us have been hanging out together long enough to know that we care about each other enough to say, dude, can you give me some ideas on this topic? This is what I'm trying to figure out. And we do that every now and then. I think it's for Randy and I, it's pretty informal that we do that, and it works. And those are good friends. And you want good friends to have the permission to say, Daniel, I got an idea. I just want to share with you. And I want to share it with you because I care, and I hope what I'm sharing with you may be helpful.
Yeah, and just to kind of tie that up, I think, Randy said it's incumbent upon me. I think it really is. I think it's a two-way street, right? I may have something that I want to offer to a colleague, though I don't always know how that's going to be received. Yeah. And so if I'm willing to say, hey, look, I would like your feedback, or I would simply like you to be a sounding board for my ideas, whatever it may be. But I think permission goes a long way. If I can ask for permission, because most of us have feedback to share with others, that we're not always sure that that's welcome. So if I can kind of open it up, I think that goes a long way.
Yeah, and my satirical line is, I don't coach anybody unless they ask me to or pay me.
We have a few questions here in the chat box, so let's get to those.
Okay, great.
Let's try that. I don't know, Daniel, whether you are able to see the chat box or not, but if you are, then you can see what I see right here. So,
all right, I am.
Let's start with John has a question. His question is, what do you do after you have gone through your honest self-evaluation and gone through that process and still concluded the problem was outside and not you? Where do you go from there?
Yeah, so John, whether that's your question or it's just a question that may be on your mind, if that's the answer that we've come to, that I've gone through the self-reflection, I have taken personal responsibility for my emotions, my actions, my attitudes, all of that I'm taking ownership of, and I still come to the conclusion that, the other person was at fault or whatever the case may be. I think the next question is, so what? What do I do next? So it may be that I was wronged, or it may be that it truly was out of my control. That's okay. There's going to be plenty of those situations in life. And I think it's important to distinguish between the victim and the victim mentality. So it's, that distinction is just accepting that this happened. It wasn't my fault. It wasn't fair, period. And I'm still in the driver's seat when it comes to my next steps. I've still got to map out what I do next. It doesn't abdicate me from being responsible for my next step. I don't know if that helps answer John's question, but I think it's a good point that it's not always that we want to have a kind of groundedness around looking at what am I self-reflecting on, because there are a lot of things that we can't control that weren't our fault, that weren't fair or right. I'm still in the driver's seat about next step. Go ahead.
That's an important point, Daniel. You're still in the driver's seat about how to deal with that. Example, I remember a story of a guy who worked for a business owner who was, pick any word you want to pick, belligerent, obnoxious, rude, racist, sexist, pick all those words and bundle them all up in a bucket. And this guy worked for that guy. And he got to a point where he got tired of being in that environment. And as an executive in the organization, he went to the business owner and he threw down an ultimatum. He said, I can't change you, but I can request that I change the way you act and talk in front of me. And that's what I'm requesting. I can't change you, but I can change how you engage with and around me. And if you're not willing to do that, then I will have to make another change.
That's awesome. And I think that's empowerment, Teddy.
Yeah.
And it's not always going to be a rosy picture.
Nope.
But I think that's a very good illustration of I'm taking responsibility for me, and this is what I'm requesting of you in that change I make. That's awesome.
And it doesn't always work, but you still need to do the right thing for you, the human. So
yeah.
So
here's another question. This one is from Ruth, and she says, when you leave a bad situation or a job or a bad boss, how do you positively discuss that during future interviews? She doesn't want to get dinged for it or look badly upon. And what if avoiding job search because of previous bad bosses and afraid the past bad boss follows you? I'm not sure exactly what that means. They'd have to go to the videotape to see that. But basically, okay, you leave a job, bad situation. How do you play that in the next interview when they ask you about your past employer?
Yeah, I think that's a good question too, because it's important that we are careful and thoughtful about how we phrase our prior experiences. I think avoiding labeling language is important. So we talk about a previous experience we had, rather than saying I had a real, which obviously we wouldn't say, this is a little facetious, right? We wouldn't go into interview and say, hey, I'm the right candidate. The last guy I worked for, awful, but I'm sure you'll be better, right? We wouldn't use that kind of language. But selecting words like,
tell me,
I worked with somebody who had a very laser focus on quality. And at times it was difficult to meet those expectations, not just for me, but other members of my team, right? So kind of putting it in as objective language as we can, and then describing our own ability to work with or inside that kind of environment in as candid terms as we feel is appropriate. I don't think we have any obligation to kind of air the laundry in the job interview just because we had an experience in the past that was difficult. If it should come up, I think it's at our discretion what we share about that. Not trying to avoid the question, but in the confines of an interview, what's appropriate for me to share about it. And when I do share things about it, making sure I'm using very neutral, objective terms and emphasizing, the personal responsibility side of it. This is what I learned from that experience, in other words.
And I think like that.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I like that because if you could talk about a previous experience that wasn't as rewarding or it was overly challenging, but what did I learn from that experience that I can now use in this upcoming position that we're talking about?
Yeah.
There's a word.
Go ahead, Randy.
Yeah, there's a word that we haven't really used a whole lot, but the word is control. And one of the things that is frustrating for a lot of job hunters is they feel like this, we're talking of the victim mentality, the lack of control.
Yeah.
I can't, what I try to tell people is all we can control is our time. We can control our attitude and what happens in life, whether it's, again, the legitimate, hey, I was a victim of a downsizing or COVID-19, right? How we let that play up in our head, I think, says a lot about what actions we're going to take in our mindset. But that whole thought of control, and I like what we've talked about here, because I think what you're saying, Daniel, if I'm paraphrasing, is I can't control what other people do and say, like to Teddy's point. But what I can do is try to control as best I can how I interpret that and how that plays out as I go forward in life, mindset-wise. Am I on the right path with that?
Yeah, I think that's good. And I would even say, how we eventually choose to feel about it. Because we're gonna have feelings, and I'm not suggesting that we need to suppress those. though in the end, I think we have to make a decision about what we do with those feelings. If I'm carrying a sense of resentment or grievance, I need to find some way to kind of reconcile that or to express it a little bit differently. But I think your notion, Randy, that really we control our time and sort of our attitude. And there's a lot that goes into controlling that attitude. What are we choosing to feed our minds? How are we managing our emotions so that we do, have that attitude that we are proud of, that really gives us the energy that we need to go out and pursue that search?
We have a clarification on that last question that I said we'd have to go to the videotape because I'm old, right? Videotape. But anyway, the clarity was this. If you had come from a painful work experience, bad boss, bad situation, it's painful, not so much how that plays out in your interview, but being afraid or leery of repeating that.
Yeah.
And that hamstring you, the analysis paralysis, whatever that phrase is, or, hey, you know what? I'm afraid to mess up again. And I'm a little gun shy. I want to get back on that horse and ride it. So how do we deal with that? How do we process that?
Thank you for that clarification from Ruth on that one. I think there's two things that come to mind just kind of thinking about that right off. So one is there a way I can reconcile that? Maybe another way, is there a way I can heal that? Is there a way I can make amends for that situation? Not suggesting you have to go back to that person if it involved a person, but what is it that I can do in my own life that's going to help me really kind of extract the learning and move forward? So, and you may have already figured that part of it out. And then secondly, I think just being keenly aware of the distinction between the fear and perhaps the healthy sense of caution. So, don't walk into a situation blindsided just saying, well, if I just have to believe it'll never happen again, because then you may miss the signposts along the way. Though don't give in to the fear, because we're liable to just kind of hold ourselves back out of fear that something might happen. So I think we have to be cautious, though try to tip the scale on the side of caution versus fear. Yeah. Don't know if that's helpful. It's a good question.
Yeah, and I also think that good research, good open conversations, asking the right questions in interviews can help you in that context. There's nothing wrong with, in an interview, asking, corporate culture, team culture, the philosophy of the organization of, of engagement in the workforce. Ask good, open conversation questions, and you may find out that, oh my God, this new guy is nothing like him.
Hey, Daniel, before you address Teddy's question, and maybe you can provide some questions to ask an employer. I call it the pebble in the shoe and the thorn in the paw that caused you grief at your old job. You don't want to repeat that knowingly. So what are some questions? But before we do, we're about halfway through today. Teddy, yeah, see,
you're right on, buddy.
I'm doing housekeeping today. Daniel Lobb is with us. He's talking about the mindset for success. Daniel is president of TRP Enterprises. And I think TRP is totally responsible person. So we're talking about accountability, responsibility, avoiding the victim mentality, the victim mindset, and as it relates to interviewing. So, all right, we've been down that path. We've had an ugly boss. We've had an ugly work culture. So what are some of the questions that we can have in the back of our mind, or maybe it's our intuitive, how we see things as we walk through the facility? What are some indicators that tell us, okay, we may be heading down that same path? How do we try to ferret that out before we say yes to the new job offer?
Good. Randy, I don't have questions off the top of my head. I think, so I'll defer to the part of the question I feel I can better answer, which is, kind of having the intuitive looking around, just really observing the culture. And I think culture is something in a workplace that is not so much defined by what we say as what we do. So if you can be very observant to the behavior in the culture, what people seem to celebrate, what they seem to tolerate, what they seem to get excited by, I think that can give us a lot of clue. Maybe Teddy, you got some additional insight if I can reverse interview this and ask you that question.
Oh, by the way, just to buy you time to think, Teddy, I'll buy you a moment to think, okay? That's something that at Goodwill we talk about, how our actions drive the culture. So how we behave, what we tolerate, what we don't, how we interact with each other, those help drive the business and help drive our the behaviors drive the rest. So I bought you about 30 seconds, Teddy.
Yeah, I got it. And I'm not going to go too deep in this other than to say this. I still think that we have to, as totally responsible person, as a totally responsible person, we have to really look at ourselves. We have to ask ourselves, why did I think that was so bad? And why am I afraid of going there? And, you know, and then truly be open to that self-analysis. Because, you know, the reality is we're always a part of the situation. Yeah. You know, in some way or another. And again, it goes back to what I earlier said, and maybe that's because we were tolerant. Give you an example, which will lead to the next conversation. Let me get my notes here in front of me. So years ago, in a previous life that nobody will ever be able to discover because there's no trail of it, okay, I worked at a chemical plant, and I had 4 young daughters. And my professionalism, there was none. I worked in a chemical plant with a bunch of guys who our language was whatever the heck we wanted it to be. The way we treated each other was whatever we wanted to be. I'm telling you, I'm serious. It was ugly. It was ugly, but I was a part of that. And I remember that one day, I will never forget this. One of my wife said to me, one of your daughters just said to me that I don't like Dad.
Wow.
Yeah, that was powerful. That was really powerful. Now, I share that because it's in the context of the environment that I chose and in some way or another enjoyed being a part of. But I did not look at how that was impacting the thing called me. And so, Daniel, you know, if you look at this, you know, the totally responsible person, you know, how should we look at the tribe that we hang out with, and how is that tribe impacting ourselves for our future? What are your thoughts on that?
Teddy, I appreciate that personal story because it's a very telling example. I think we you know, we are very much products of our environment, which may sound kind of antithetical to the idea of a totally responsible person, though in a professional work environment, if we're there 40 hours a week ish, you know, that's a significant amount of time that we are invested in whatever that culture is. And we're certainly going to morph and adapt to that culture and carry it with us. So I think you got it without asking. You got it from an innocent child who said, hey, I don't like who Dad is or who he's becoming. Sometimes our kids are not always forthcoming with that information. And even if we ask and pry, they're not going to tell us. But I think if we can, you know, if we can do that honest self-evaluation of, you know, am I living the legacy that I want to be mine? And I do a lot of work with individuals around identifying the important character traits that I want as part of my legacy, and then defining the gap. Am I behaving in ways that are consistent with those character traits? So it's a self-reflective piece, though. Back to Randy's question, you could certainly do that with someone whom you trust, but really looking, I always start with, what are those character traits? And by character traits, I mean respect, trust, integrity, kindness, compassion, empathy, on and on we could go. But what are the top 2 or 3 that I really want to define me? That if I wasn't in the room, people would use when they spoke about me. And so if I can first of all, just identify what those important character traits are, and then reflect on personal actions. And the way we often do it is we go to the positive first. So I think about a situation which may be tough for me, and then I will journal in detail, how am I going to express this particular character trait like integrity? What does it look like in nitty-gritty terms? And I find if you do that in a proactive way, make that part of your kind of daily thought process, you'll find that you're building that sort of personal legacy that's important. And you may find that you're in conflict with it in certain aspects of a workplace culture. We're very much products of our environment, and we can kind of, I think there's a lot that we can reveal to ourselves or through an interpersonal conversation with someone else that helps us find whether we're really where we want to be or not.
I think it was it may have been my grandmother who said years ago, write your obituary now and see if it says what you want it to say about you as a person.
That's powerful too. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is good stuff, Daniel. Really, this is good stuff. We could go on for hours more, but we promised everybody that at 1 o'clock they can go get a biscuit and a beer. Do us a favor. Just take the mentality, the philosophy of TRP, and wrap that one more time around the world of job search in a summary statement. Could you do that for me?
Yes, of course. The answer is always yes, Teddy. So wrapping that up into a summary job search statement, I think regardless of what is happening in the world around me and in the situation I find myself, I am truly and ultimately responsible for how I manage myself in that situation. So if I'm in a job search mode, it's looking at what is it that I can do? What are those marketable skills that I have that I can really highlight to a prospective employer? And how can I be proactive about looking for those next opportunities and position myself not just as a great candidate, but as someone who's here to add value? And I think that's what we each can do as a totally responsible person when it comes to searching for that next career opportunity.
Yeah, I get it. I'm with you. Daniel, thanks a lot for joining us. Really appreciate it. Always a thrill for you and I to get together and chat. And today we did it publicly. And despite what Carol said, you guys still don't know where I worked back then. Let's Randy,
hang around. Daniel, hang around and chime in here as need be. We usually take the last 10, 15 minutes to sort of summarize maybe our thoughts and reflections on what you shared. And maybe we have our own little tip. And I actually have a timely tip that deals with responsibility and accountability and professionalism and all that. And it actually just unfolded over the last, 4 or 5 business days. So I'll share that. But I think the accountability goes both ways. And it's not simply the job hunter, but it's also employers. And I had a boss years ago tell me that no is fine, but don't lead me on. Just be honest with me. And because all I can control is my time, essentially. And when I talk about accountability from an employer standpoint, when they say I'm going to call or they commit to doing something, then at the very least, even if things get put on hold, at least let the candidate know what's going on. If there's an interview set up and the phone call doesn't happen, at some point, the employer needs to be accountable and say, let's reschedule. And too often, I think the onus and the guilt and the whatever seems to fall on, the job hunter, they're the ones that want the job. They're the ones that have to bend over backward to accommodate us. Well, it's a two-way street. And quite frankly, part of the, do I want to work there from the employee standpoint is how was I treated during that interview process? And we quit bosses. We don't quit jobs a lot of times. So a lot of that is relationship. It is what we have witnessed in our upbringing. So having said all that, we need to be accountable. And I mentioned earlier before we came on today that our sons were in I'm guessing the 3rd or 4th, maybe 5th grade. We bought them an alarm clock and said, guys, it's up to you to get up for school. And if you don't, there's going to be issues. But from then on, they were accountable and they were up on time. We didn't have to go wake them up. But here's something I do want to share. And then we can turn it back to Teddy and that. And this deals with, this is a pet peeve of mine. Ruth Owens, if you're still on here, you know exactly what I'm going to talk about when it comes to your cell phone.
Now, Randy, we're not supposed to use people's last names.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
It wasn't Ruth Owens.
Well, Ruth is retired now, so she can, yeah. But love Ruth to death. Ruth and Susan and I work together, and now Shaquelle's part of our team at Goodwill. But a few things when it comes to, so here's Randy's tips for your cell phone. True story. Yesterday, again, I won't go into detail, but I had a referral, a person who wanted to take part in one of our other programs, not mine. So I gave my colleague the name and phone number of this person who wanted assistance. Well, my colleague called. It was bad penmanship, so it could have been one of a couple of different numbers. So she called the first number. It was disconnected. So thinking, well, logically, it must be this other one. Well, you would not, and I can't even repeat what the outward greeting said, but essentially it was, leave a message, you. Yeah. Now, and it was a young male's voice. So it could have been totally a different person. It could have been her son. Point being, if she's looking for a job and that's the greeting that an employer gets, I don't think it's going to go any farther. So here's some other tips real quick. On your cell phone, make sure you set up your voicemail. How many times do you call and it said, the mailbox has not been set up? Or
it's full.
You read my fertile mind there,
yes,
Dr. Burriss.
Yes,
so that's, yeah, the mailbox. I had that happen today. I called one of my clients. The guy's mailbox is full. He's a job hunter. Great guy, but his mailbox is full. So what are you going to do from there? But also make sure it's your own voice. Okay. When we call, we're not doctors and there's not the HIPAA thing involved as much, but you know what? I don't want to leave a message when it just says you've reached 336-555-1212 and Daniel Lobb is my client. I'm not going to say, well, Daniel, I'm with the professional center. We need to meet at a certain time. Because what if that's not you? And so I want to hear your voice. I want to hear, this is the first time I may hear your voice. So make it professional and friendly and make sure, again, that it's you and not the automated component. And quite frankly, if I'm an employer and I have an interview for Daniel Lobb and I call and you know what, maybe I misdialed the phone number. I misdialed it because again, fat fingers. So I misdial it. Now I'm leaving, I guess, a message for what I thought was Daniel, but I called the wrong number. And I have no idea. So Daniel loses. For all of those reasons, make sure that you have a greeting. It's your name. You've emptied out your mailbox. You've set it up. And also when you leave a message, don't drone on for 5 minutes. Make sure you leave your name and also leave your phone number and repeat it because sometimes they're not, again, you may be calling from a corporate location where the direct dial number is different from the main number. So for a whole host of reasons, make sure you repeat your name, repeat your phone number, and state the purpose of your call and be brief. But again, that's a bit of a pet peeve. Teddy, I don't know if you've run into that.
So are you saying that I should get rid of my Betty Boop auto voicemail thing?
Well, Teddy, you want me to, are you giving me permission to be your accountability person here?
Not publicly, buddy.
And I've got to go ahead. Brandon, I didn't realize you called yesterday. I'm going to go ahead and change my voicemail greeting right now.
I couldn't believe it. And when they sent the email back to say, yeah, you wouldn't believe what the greeting, I'm like, wow. So it's a big world and I get that, but you know what? Again, we can control our time and our attitude. So
these are great tips, Randy. Really good stuff.
Yeah. Teddy, what you got?
All right, here's what I got. So again, Randy, thanks for those ideas. Daniel, thanks for showing up and helping us. I want to talk about the word baggage because all of you got baggage. Oh, wait a minute, I do too. We all have stuff. We all have stuff in our lives that, in our satirical way, we call it baggage. It's the stuff that we carry around with us. And you can't just get rid of it. I mean, if you had a lousy night last night, you're going for an interview at 9 o'clock in the morning, you got that baggage of a lousy night. If if the mortgage is due and you're worried about the the bank calling or sending that letter, because that's baggage. It's real. It's not freaking fake. So don't pretend that it is. And so you have to know that your baggage goes with you wherever you go. However, you have to, as a totally responsible person, manage your baggage. You got to manage this. So when you're, hang on one second. When you're going to do a phone screen or an interview, you're going to network and have conversations with people, you have to know it is time for me to take my baggage and put it in a safe space for me to come back and acknowledge when I get done. So figure out how that works for you. How can you take your stuff that you have that weighs heavily on you and put it in a safe space? Be aware of it, know it's there, and know that you'll come back to it later on. Dale Carnegie refers to this as managing stuff in your life in day-tight compartments. Manage the thing that you have to manage right now. And right now I have to manage a conversation with my buddy Randy and my buddy Daniel. So I'm not worried about all those emails that are coming in and all those solicitations from Nigeria for $16 million. And, my wife wants me to do laundry and my knee hurts and et cetera. That's not important. Day-tight compartments. Focus today. Focus this moment on what's important and acknowledge that that your baggage is in a safe space and you can pick it up later and deal with it.
Yeah. Hey, Daniel, something I always like to ask, and I failed to do that today, and that's the why. What got you involved with what you do? Where did that start? What's the fire that got you lit and said, hey, I want to do this. I want to do this.
Thanks for asking that, Randy. So I'm in my mid 40s, which is that age where I'm starting to recognize that young people don't identify me as young anymore. And I've been in this job for 12 years. My first career, I was actually a student of the training program that I teach. So I was in my early 20s. I took a totally responsible person class. It was revolutionary for me. It truly challenged the way that I thought about myself and I thought about the world. Pivotal at that time in my life. And I think had I not taken that class, I wouldn't have gone on to the career that I had. So it was something that just personally had a great deal of meaning for me. I went through a career transition about 12 years ago, which at the time was very scary. But in retrospect, it was just a great opportunity. It opened up new doors that I never would have expected. I had a very kind of tunnel vision, thought about my future and thought I was going to be in this particular career forever. So when that ended, it was like, well, wait a minute, who am I? And I think we go through that when we go through a search because we're not our career. And I think for all of us, maybe even more so for men, that's to lose a job, if it's taken from me, it's tough. We think, well, what is my worth? And we probably put undue emphasis on our career. But it gave me, my wife and I took some time to kind of hit the pause button and reflect and think about what was really important. I couldn't think of anything I wanted to do more than teach the kind of class that allowed me to have the kind of experience that broadened my horizons. So I pursued the guys who were running the company that I'm now a co-owner of and said, hey, look, you need a succession plan and I'm the answer to your problems. And poor guys, I mean, they fell for it, But,
hey,
it drives me, Randy. It really does. Yeah.
You could be my younger brother and you have hair. So you do look younger. Exact same story with me. I was a radio jock into my late 20s, early 30s, and decided to make a career change, but was stuck. Again, long story short, I hired a firm to help me reinvent myself. I loved it. And I said, wow, this is very cool. I wish more people knew about this. So I got into recruiting so I could see that side of how the hiring process worked. And then I went back to that company that I had paid and I said, hey, could I help some of your clients? Because I value what you do. I know how you do what you do. And I know how the other side of the table thinks and what they do. And so that kind of led me on this path. And again, I'm a generation ahead of you, close to it. But I see a lot of the same things in your journey that I had. And so those are, to me, they're always interesting, the why behind why people do what they do. And I can tell, man, you love what you do. Teddy, you love what you do, and I love what I do. And that's why we have these shows. Yeah. I do want to mention that next week we'll have Val Boston in. And Val, Boston and Associates, I've known Val for many years, and he is a consultant. He does a lot of different types of consulting, but diversity and inclusion are two of one of the main topics that he consults with businesses on. So he'll join us next week on Wednesday at noon, and he will be talking about the job search in a diverse marketplace. What are our biases, whether as a hiring official or as a candidate? And biases could extend to age, race, accents that you have, nationalities,
car color,
hair color or not, all kinds of things.
Everything.
How do they play out during that job hunt and the interview process? So we're going to have a fascinating chat with Val next week. Looking forward to having him come on. And Teddy, it looks like we're just about out of time.
Yeah, and Randy, I can relate to. I mean, all three of us have very similar journeys. You know, I wasn't a DJ, and but I worked in Vegas for a long time. I'm not going to tell you what I did in Vegas. You wouldn't believe it, a nickel at a time. But I do what
I've seen the pictures, Teddy.
I do what I do because I love it. And I really think that's critical for people to find that. And I think as a totally responsible person, it is upon ourselves to discover what it is that gets us out of bed. Daniel, again, buddy, I love you. Randy, thanks for showing up again this week. Everybody who's here, remember, every Wednesday at noon, tell your friends about it, because today we only managed to get 42,000 people on. And we have room for easily 100,000 people. And so we want you to have fun with us and learn from us. If there's a topic that you want us to bring to you, if there is a special speaker who has some knowledge, some nuggets that can impact you, tell us about them. If you can't find Randy Wooden and Teddy Burriss online, your internet connection's too slow. Hey, everybody, have a great week.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, gentlemen. Really enjoyed it. And next week will be great. Val is exceptional.
Yeah, he is. Talk to you soon. See you next time.
All right, guys. Take good care.